We're going to talk about migration actually now and the asylum process in this country. And the conversation we're going to have is around myth busting to a degree. So there's no shortage. Anyone who listens to the show will know there's no shortage of disinformation or misinformation that swirls around this issue, so much so that Leo Varadkar before Christmas talked about the government needing to do a better job of tackling it. Plenty of his cabinet colleagues have since agreed with him. We had Catherine Day today, who's chair of the government's expert advisory group, talking about the state could and should do a lot more to allay fears about asylum seekers. But so far, I think it's only fair to describe the government approach to this as kind of being ad hoc or on the hoof. We have decided here on the show to tackle it head on and confront some of the most common things that you tend to see and hear. And they are the same things time and time again. Online, whether it be on somewhere like Twitter or X, whether it's at the picket lines of some of these protests like in Roscrea, or indeed repeated by some of our elected representatives, even in Dáil Éireann. Ciaran O'Connor is with me in studio. He is a misinformation analyst at the Institute for Strategic Dialogue. Kieran, it's good to see you. Thanks a million for coming into studio. I mean, we could talk about this until we go off air at 7 o'clock. It's such a big issue. So what I propose we do is maybe go through some of the most common tropes that we do tend to hear. Yep. And I was tempted to start with kind of Ireland is full because it's the one that underpins them all, but we might build up to that, given it is the big one. And instead, let's start with one that I heard quite a bit in Roscrea last weekend. And it was an assertion that these asylum seekers, they come here and none of them work. You know, that we don't have a problem with people who come here and they pay their way, but we have all these people who come to Ireland and they just sponge off the state. That's why they're coming here. Is there any truth in that myth?
Well, first of all, don't forget that asylum seekers are not allowed to work without permission. First of all, they must apply for permission to work and can only do so if they have not received a decision on their application in 5 or 6 months, some period of time like that. Research from the ESRI in 2023 last year found that many asylum seekers take up the right to work when they have received permission. And since mid-2018, about 12,000 international protection applicants have received the right to work. So international protection applicants are not entitled to social welfare support, but they are subject to different means tests, so they do receive these kinds of financial supports. But at least that data shows that it's a simple total falsehood that all asylum seekers don't take up the opportunity to work.
And once they progress through the asylum system and they come out the other side and they are given leave to stay in this country, I mean, what are the facts and figures around their involvement in the labour force? I mean, is there strong evidence, like some suggest, that they sit around and draw the dole for the next 40 years?
Well, if you look at the number of Ukrainians who've come to this country since February of 2022, upwards of 100,000, I think now at this stage, 15,000 of Ukrainians have entered the workforce since arriving on this country. Now, I don't have the figures for international protection applicants to hand, but I did mention those 12,000 who've taken up the permission to work. So that does show that be it refugees or asylum seekers are entering the workforce when they can, when they have the permission to enter the workforce.
Yeah, and I think if you discount those who've gone home, upwards about 15 or 20,000 Ukrainians have actually gone back to Ukraine. And then that, for people at home, I just struck that figure, maybe 15 out of still 80,000 doesn't sound huge. That 80,000 includes everybody from newborn infants up to elderly pensioners. There's a reason we don't count them when we're talking about the employment rate and the unemployment rate in this country. So that is a pretty high figure. Let's move on then to another thing that we hear time and again, which is the fears local community have about crime and about crime levels increasing on foot of asylum seekers moving into their area. Is there anything in that?
No, to put very simply, but to kind of elaborate on that, I think asylum seekers, like any sector of society, are not a uniform block of people. There will be, people who may break the law or commit crimes, and you hope that if that does happen, then the Gardaí take action against that. This topic also gets at a larger idea, this idea of increased migration equating to increased crime in an area. This really is one of the most pernicious myths and misleading narratives that surrounds asylum seekers, surrounds migration. Speaking in March last year, the Gardaí said that there's been no significant increase in crime statistics as a result of the increase in asylum seekers arriving in this country. And only speaking again this month, Gardaí said that despite significant and consistent disinformation in relation to international protection applicants, the force has not recorded any increase in crime or public order caused by the applicants. And it's also notable there that we see the Gardaí coming out, and where they haven't used that terminology before, but they are labelling it as clear, consistent disinformation that is being shared openly online that is linking migration to crime. Around this time last year, we saw in our analysis, in our monitoring, the kind of beginning of misinformation, disinformation that linked migrants to sexual violence in particular as well. And that's very serious, horrible claims being made, and these being shared openly online, and in turn then that being used to foster hatred, foster suspicion, foster hostility against asylum seekers when there's no statistics.
There are no statistics. There's no statistical evidence to back up a link between migrants or asylum seekers and an increase in sexual crime.
The Gardaí have said that, no.
All right, that's very clear, because again, that's the other. We talked last week on the show about some of these protests being organised on Telegram, and will it be your mother next? Will it be your sister next? I mean, these stickers that they wanted to hand it out. The implication being obvious that they were going to be targets of sexual violence. So listen, that's very straightforward. Is there an increase? Do they lead to an increase in crime, asylum seekers moving into an area? Categorically, no. What about just overall numbers? Because the other argument you often hear repeated time and time again is that, you know, amongst our European neighbours, we are a soft touch. We are the soft underbelly of Europe, and therefore we are being overrun compared to elsewhere.
Well, first of all, don't forget that Ireland is not an outlier in the EU in seeing an increased number of application of asylum seekers coming to Ireland. I think there is a perception that, as you say, Ireland is receiving a disproportionate amount of asylum seekers. And Eurostat, the statistical office of the EU, put out figures in 2022 that said they found that the proportion of international protection applications in Ireland as a percentage of the entire population was 0.18, so very low. But for comparison, the percentages in some other EU states were 0.6 for Austria, 0.2 for Belgium, and 0.28 for Luxembourg. So we're lower than many other countries in that respect. And as well as that, regarding claims about financial or material support for asylum seeker applicants here receive somewhere to live. So it's maybe a hotel room, maybe it's a porta-cabin, maybe it's a tent, you know, these kinds of conditions. They receive meals and a weekly payment of €38. In the UK, asylum seekers get £49 a week, which is more than €38 if my conversion rates are sticking true. And then I believe somewhere in the region of £37.50 in Germany, depending on different conditions. So rates that are higher or comparable to what asylum seeker applicants are living here in Ireland.
You mentioned some of the supports they get. One of the other things that's often suggested is, and we heard it here in the show last week, is asylum seekers getting houses ahead of Irish people in the midst of a housing crisis.
I don't think that's true. No, I think one claim that sticks in my mind from a couple of weeks ago that appeared online was that asylum seekers are getting places with their own front door.
Yes.
Now, a hotel room has a front door, or these different places, but the language is very loose. It's used to create a perception that they are being given a 5-star suite, or they are being given a 4-bed house for free.
They're not jumping to the top of social housing waiting lists while waiting for asylum.
That or confirms that, no.
Okay, we've built up to, well, I mean, we haven't necessarily built up because there's a million more we could pick and choose from, and more appear every single day. But for the moment, we've built up to Ireland is full. So this is the big one that underpins so much of the debate. Is Ireland full?
So the thing about this phrase is that it's become one of the central slogans of anti-immigrant protesters here, and it has its origins amongst far-right figures, far-right activists in Ireland, being first popularised and used some years ago. If you're to look at different, I suppose, data points to show that Ireland is not full. So first of all, our population density is 72 people per kilometre, lower than that of many similar-sized European countries like Slovakia or Denmark. It's the same. We have the same population density that's on average for Europe. In the 2022 census, there was 160,000 vacant or disused houses or apartments, and then we also know that that there's been a severe housing crisis as well. So, when looking at those data points, no, Ireland is not full, but that doesn't really get at the kind of appeal or effectiveness maybe of this slogan. This slogan is used pejoratively. It's used to, it can't be for people who proclaim it and support it, especially the kind of prominent figures who popularised it. They're not basing this on facts, or they're not basing this on any data or kind of research. It's used simply as a call to blame asylum seekers or refugees as those responsible for taking homes, for taking accommodation off the market, or for taking accommodation from homeless Irish people. That's a clear misunderstanding of the issue. Ireland's shortage of affordable or vacant or affordable or available housing has not been caused by an increase in numbers of immigrants or refugees, but really by the failure to build, renovate or increase our housing stock over the last 10 years. So, and then the last point on the idea of being Ireland is full of what? Is it full of software developers who come here to work for technology companies? Is it full of other EU citizens who have the right here to move here? Or for those who use this phrase, is it full of people of colour who come here from parts of the developing world? And that's really what it seems to be aimed at when it's used by many people.
Yeah, how to disagree. Kieran, listen, thanks a million for joining us. Really, really informative stuff. No increase in crime with asylum seekers moving into an area, and absolutely no evidence to back up the suggestion that they pose a particular threat of sexual violence. No evidence of asylum seekers jumping housing queues, social housing queues, and being housed before Irish families. No evidence that they're here to sponge off social welfare. And like everywhere else in Europe, an increase in the numbers coming here to claim asylum, and an increase that is likely to be sustained in the coming years. If you listen to government, they absolutely acknowledge that. But we are not, per head of population, we are not being overrun when compared to elsewhere in Europe. In fact, the numbers coming here are a lot less than other European countries. More than some, but less than others. And that, none of what I've said there, statements of opinion, all statements of fact. Ciaran O'Connor, thank you very, very much again. A misinformation analyst at the Institute for Strategic Dialogue.